please.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. This is our third Quran study session. In the last session, in detail, we went over chapter 1, titled Al-Fatiha, or the opening. Chapter 2 of the Quran is titled Al-Baqarah, or the cow. And amazingly, Al-Baqarah picks up where chapter 1, Al-Fatiha, leaves off. How so? Well, recall that Al-Fatiha ends with a prayer. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Lord, guide us to the straight path, the path of those who have blessed, the path of those you have blessed, not of those who incur wrath, not of those who are astray. So we ask the Lord for guidance, and chapter 2, Al-Baqarah, actually begins with a cue for guidance. ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. This is the scripture, meaning the Quran. This is the scripture in which there is no doubt, containing guidance for muttaqin. Muttaqin is the plural for muttaqi. And there are three words typically used in English translations of the Quran for muttaqin. The first one is pious. The second one is the righteous. And the third one is the reverent. As we shall see shortly, none of these three English words is a perfect substitute for muttaqi. But perhaps righteous is the better of the three choices. So today, when I use the word righteous, I mean muttaqi. And when I say muttaqi, I mean the righteous in English language. What is intriguing and possibly even counterintuitive is that the verse that I just recited singles out one particular group that the Quran guides to the truth, that the Quran guides to salvation. And that group is muttaqin, or the righteous. Now, the following verse in chapter 3, verse 138 is even more pointed. هَذَا بَيَانٌ لِلنَّاسِ وَهُدًى وَمَوْعِظَةٌ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. This, again, meaning the Quran, this is an exposition for humankind and guidance and exhortation for muttaqin. Maw'izah, or exhortation, means urgent advice or recommendation. So the verse says the Quran is bayanun linnas, an exposition for humankind. In other words, God intended and revealed the Quran for all humanity. However, in practice, the Quran is hudan wa maw'izatun lil muttaqin. The Quran is guidance and exhortation for muttaqin, or the righteous. So the verse didn't say the Quran is guidance and exhortation for all humanity, rather a subset of humanity, muttaqin. In other words, these people, the muttaqin, the righteous, are most amenable and receptive to Quran's message and teachings. Who is muttaqi? Who is a righteous in the Quran? Well, you have probably walked on a trail in backcountry. These trails are usually quite rough. You would have to walk through thorny bushes that can easily rip your clothing. In ordinary Arabic language, muttaqi is a person who walks through thorny bushes and takes every care that his clothes are not caught in bushes and be torn by their branches and thorns. Now, the Quran employs the same idea when it comes to navigating the maze of life. Every day, you and I, we have to walk through thorny bushes when making choices and decisions, while trying very hard to maintain our integrity and stay true to our beliefs. So this is really the context and the background for the usage of the word muttaqi in the Holy Quran. Now, what is the hallmark of the muttaqi, or the righteous? What would make this personality type receptive to divine guidance, as verse 2 of chapter 2 says, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. What would make this personality type, muttaqi, receptive to divine guidance? Well, muttaqi is a person who has an abundance of taqwa, which is typically rendered as piety, righteousness, or reverence in English. And again, as I mentioned before, none of these words really is a good substitute for taqwa. Taqwa and its derivatives have been used in the Quran about 258 times. We don't have enough time to review all these verses today, but inshallah, today we will examine taqwa in depth as it is presented in the Holy Quran, vis-a-vis a few of the more important verses that deal with taqwa. So let's begin. What is taqwa, or righteousness? Taqwa comes from the root wiqaya in Arabic, which means to protect, to guard, and to ward off. Let me repeat one more time, because probably this is one of the most important things that I will mention today. Wiqaya, which is the root for taqwa, means to protect, to guard, and to ward off. Wiqaya is whatever protects a phenomenon from damage. For a building, its columns are wiqaya, because the columns protect the building from falling down. For a car, wiqaya is the brakes. Shield was wiqaya for warriors in the past, which protected them from injury on the battlefield. Now, we humans also have wiqaya in our soul, or in Quranic terms, nafs. God has implanted wiqaya in human soul, or nafs. We have a built-in restraint system which protects us from harm and damage. It protects us from self-harm and self-injury, as well as inflicting harm and damage on others. So taqwa essentially amounts to self-control, or in Farsi, khishtan-dari. Taqwa is the ability to self-regulate and self-police. Let me repeat one more time. Taqwa is an inborn capability to self-regulate and self-police. Amazing ability, isn't it? if our viqaya, that restraint system, is well maintained, if we have taqwa, we will not harm ourselves and others in daily life. To borrow a term from the auto industry, this inner brake comes standard. The inner brake, the inner restraint system called taqwa comes standard with every human being. It is not an option that you would need to add. What am I saying here? Taqwa is inborn. It's not like some people have taqwa or righteousness and others do not. It is not something that you need to acquire. You have it. You just need to maintain it. When God created Adam, the human prototype, he equipped Adam's soul with taqwa. God equipped the Adam soul with the capability for self-control and self-policing. Here is what the Quran has to say about this. Chapter 91, verses 7 through 10. وَنَفْسٍ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. By the soul and how God formed it and inspired it to know its wickedness, fujur, and righteousness, taqwa. Indeed, the one who purifies his soul prospers, and indeed, the one who corrupts it fails. So according to this revelation, our nafs, our self or soul, has two opposing capabilities, fujur and taqwa. Fujur comes from the root fajara in Arabic language, which means to break up, to split up. Arabs call the daybreak or dawn fajr. That's when we can say our morning prayers or morning salat. Because light breaks through darkness and daylight emerges. So fujur is our negative capacity to break and violate ethical boundaries set by God. And when we overstep these boundaries, when we tear up these boundaries, we will commit evil. Taqwa, on the other hand, is our capacity, our capability to refrain from breaking and violating ethical boundaries. Taqwa is our inward capability to respect red lines, to respect moral boundaries. So this is what taqwa means in its core. Now, the Quran uses a number of variants for taqwa, and perhaps the most significant variant is taqawallah in the Quran. Taqawallah. Taqwa is appended with the word Allah. Here is one example of the usage of the phrase taqawallah in the Quran. Again, this variant is super important. Chapter 3, verse 102. Ya ayyuhallazina amanu attaqullaha haqqa tuqatih. The verse addresses the people of faith, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu, and then immediately commands them to attaqullah. What does the phrase تقوا mean? Well, تقوا is sometimes rendered fear God in English. Oh, you who believe, fear God. I personally do not think this is a suitable translation. The more accurate translation for تقوا is be conscious, be aware of God, be mindful of God, heed God. Or for those of you who are more comfortable with Farsi, تقوای الهی به معنای شرم از خداوند هست یا پروای از خداوند. انسانی که پروای الهی داره، تقوای الهی داره، از خداوند شرم میکنه، پروای از خداوند داره. So we can translate the verse that I just recited, verse 3 in verse 102 in chapter 3 as یا ایها الذین آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته. O you who believe, be mindful and conscious of God as he is due. As he is due. In other words, constantly, not sometimes, but constantly be conscious of God's presence and power. Do not be forgetful. Do not lose sight of God in every moment of your life. Make sure God is front and center in your decision making. Make sure that God is front and center when you make choices. Front and center in your intentions and actions. Muttaqin, or the righteous, have such a mindset. They truly understand that they live in the presence of God. Muttaqin, the righteous, truly grasp, they truly appreciate that they live in the presence of God. They take heart in this profound declaration in the Quran. Write this verse down and put it on a yellow sticky and stick it on the wall of your room, and every day read this verse and have it actually memorized. Chapter 57, verse 4. وَهُوَ مَعَكُمْ أَيْنَمَا كُنْتُمْ. This is one of my most favorite verses in the Quran. وَهُوَ مَعَكُمْ أَيْنَمَا كُنْتُمْ. God is with you wherever you may be. God is with you wherever you may be. Remember, we're talking about taqwa, being conscious and mindful that we live in the presence of God. Sadly, we are sometimes oblivious of God's presence. ما عموماً غافلیم که در حضور خداوند زندگی میکنیم. And that is why there can be a disconnect between what we say we believe in and what we actually do. We may have firm belief in God, but do things that actually offend God. Why? How is it possible for me to say God exists while I do things that are abhorrent to God, like cheating, like dishonesty? Well, because I may not really see or feel God's presence in my daily life. In Islamic history, Imam Ali's name is synonymous with taqwa. Ali is correctly called Imam al-Muttaqin, the leader of the righteous. Ali is the leader of the righteous. Believe me, this is not an exaggeration. This is not just playing with words. It has a ton of meaning. It is a really meaningful phrase that Ali is Imam al-Muttaqin. He is the leader of the righteous. Why? Listen to how Ali describes his own mindset. That was his mantra. That is how he lived every moment of his life. Ali says, I did not do anything in life except that I saw Allah before it, within it, and after it. Can you imagine? That is what taqwa, or God awareness and God consciousness, really entails. The Quran actually validates Imam Ali's experience and expression. Chapter 9, verse 36. وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَ الْمُتَّقِينَ. And know that God is with muttaqin. Know that God is actually, literally with the righteous. Amazing description, isn't it? God, now if you were to visualize what the Quran is trying to convey to us, God walks with muttaqin every step of the way. God lives with muttaqin in every breath. Wherever the righteous go, they see God present. So in a nutshell, taqwa, taqway ilahi, is a mindset. It is a unique consciousness wherein the person deeply feels God's presence and thus acts accordingly. There is no disconnect anymore between what the person confesses to be true and what he does. There is no disconnect. There is no disharmony or incompatibility. He walks what he says. And now perhaps we can appreciate why muttaqin, or the righteous, do not require external policing. The righteous, muttaqin, they do not need to have a police officer at every corner so that they would respect the law. Because the main policeman in the universe, God, is present. And that's why even when the policeman, the judiciary, and arms of the law are not present, muttaqin would never overstep the boundaries. They would never transgress. God, they see and feel God's presence, so they would never cheat. They would never renege on their promise, even though they have the upper hand. They would never deceive others because they truly find themselves in the presence of God. Let me say it in Farsi. متقین در هر لحظه حضور خداوند رو حس میکنن. Now that we know what taqwa really entails, let's go back to verse 2 in chapter 2, Al-Baqarah, which I started the sermon with. And really try to understand the importance of what this verse is trying to convey to us. ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. This, the Quran, is the scripture in which there is no doubt, containing guidance for muttaqin, or the righteous. The big question is, what is so unique about taqwa, righteousness, which makes the person amenable to divine knowledge? What is embedded in taqwa, which would make the person more receptive to divine wisdom and guidance? Rumi has a fascinating story in book 2 of Masnavi, which really illustrates the connection between righteousness and guidance. And I would like to quickly go over that story with you. در این داستان مولوی سخن میگه از رابطه تنگاتنگ بین تقوا و هدایت. Rumi says there was a town where the Romans and Chinese lived together. So part of the town was occupied by the Chinese and the other part mostly by Romans. But these two communities had an intense dispute over who was more skillful in the art of painting. The Chinese would say, we are better artists. And the Romans would take exception with that and would say, no, 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 we are better artists. To resolve the dispute, the king ordered an art contest between the Romans and the Chinese. So a big room was picked to be the contest arena. One wall was assigned to the Chinese, and the opposite wall of the room was given to the Romans. And a curtain was placed between the two walls so that the Chinese and the Roman artists would not cheat and copy from each other. The Chinese asked the king to provide them with essential painting materials. They said, "Oh, king, please give us the best paint available, the best brush that is available." They got it. They got those supplies, and they started painting on their assigned wall. And they painted really awesome pictures on their assigned wall. The Romans, Rumi says, did not ask for any painting material. رومیان گفتند نیلون و نرنگ، در خورایت کار را جز دفع زنگ. در فرو بستند و صیقل می زدند، همچو گردون ساده و صافی شدند. The Romans said, no tints and colors are proper for our work. Nothing is needed except to remove the rust. They shut the door and went on burnishing. They became clear and pure like the sky. Rumi says, instead of painting on the wall, the Romans kept polishing their wall. And they made the wall really smooth and bright. They burnished the wall so much and so well, it became so reflective like a mirror. The judgment day arrived. The king first visited the Chinese wall. He was really amazed with what he saw. He really loved what the Chinese artist had painted. Then the king went to visit the Roman wall. بعد از آن آمد به سوی رومیان، پرده را برداشت رومی از میان. عکس آن تصویر و آن کردارها، زد بر این صافی شده دیوارها. هرچه آنجا دید اینجا بهنمود، دیده را از دیده خانه می رو بود. After that, the king came towards the Romans. They removed the intervening curtain. the reflection of those Chinese pictures and works of art struck upon these walls, which had been made pure from stain. All that he had seen there on the Chinese wall seemed even more beautiful here. It was snatching the eye from the socket. The reflection of the Chinese art on the polished Roman wall was even more beautiful than the original. Now Rumi draws a conclusion from the story. رومیان آن صوفیانند ای پدر، بی ز تکرار و کتاب و بی هنر، لیک صیقل کرده اند آن سینه ها، پاک از آز و حرص و بخل و کینه ها. آن صفای آینه لاشک دل است، کو نقوش بی عدد را قابل است. Incredible wisdom Rumi is sharing with us. This, what I just recited to you from Mathnavi, is one of the pillars of Rumi's teachings. The Romans, O Father, are the Sufis. They are without study and books and erudition. But they have burnished their hearts and made them pure from greed and cupidity and avarice and hatred. The purity of mirror is, beyond doubt, the heart which receives images innumerable. The most important part of this whole story is the very last verse that I recited. آن صفای آینه لاشک دل است، کو نقوش بی عدد را قابل است. Rumi says, a heart that is burnished so well and so much, and all of the rust is gone, it's going to be like a mirror which can receive images innumerable. In other words, our inner space, our heart, soul, and mind, if it is not filthy, if our inner space is not corrupted, then we will be ripe for receiving insight and wisdom directly from God. I said directly, not through the intervention of a prophet, not through the intervention of a wali, not through the intervention of a Sufi master. Directly, if our inner space, heart, soul, and mind is pure and clean, we will receive wisdom and guidance and teachings directly from God. In other words, inner cleanliness and purity would make us receptive to God and divine guidance. And taqwa is the tool that would create such a clean and pure inner space. Taqwa is the tool that we can use, that God-given inward capability is the tool that we need to create an inner environment that is pure and clean, and then that environment will be conducive to guidance. Just to make sure that we all really grasp what Rumi is trying to say, but the connection between taqwa and guidance, let's just visualize for a second. Close your eyes. Think of taqwa as a security guard that you station at the entrance to your heart, your ears, your eyes, and your mouth. In other words, you station a security guard at all the entry points into your existence, at all of the points of contact that you have with the outside world. that security guard will check the traffic that goes in and out. It will stop the filth and garbage from coming in. So your soul, heart, and mind will not get polluted. In practice, this is what taqwa does. Listen to what the Quran promises. This is God's promise to you if you work on your taqwa. Chapter 2, verse 282. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَيُعَلِّمُكُمُ اللَّهُ. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَيُعَلِّمُكُمُ اللَّهُ. If you have taqwa, if you are mindful and conscious of God, God will teach you. If you have a pure heart and soul, God will be your teacher. That is essentially what Rumi was trying to convey to us in that story of the Romans and the Chinese. Also, we find the same message in chapter 8, verse 29. يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا إِن تَتَّقُوا اللَّهَ يَجْعَلَ لَكُمْ فُرْقَانًا. O you who believe, if you remain conscious, if you remain mindful of God, He will grant you a criterion to tell right from wrong. If you have a pure heart and soul, God will grant you Furqan, the wisdom to make sound judgment, to discern right from wrong. So this is the end of my first khutbah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So I attempted to outline the main features of taqwa in the Quran for you. And hopefully by now we have a better understanding of what taqwa is and why it is so important that the Quran makes it a condition for receiving divine guidance. Now, let me add a couple of very important points about taqwa and close my sermon. Point number one, if you read the Quran carefully, you will notice that taqwa is the bedrock of Islam's moral code. In other words, taqwa is not just a virtue alongside other virtues, such as thankfulness, sincerity, integrity, and justice. No, taqwa is the mother of all virtues. Taqwa faza'il hast. Without any exception, all the Islamic moral commandments are rooted in taqwa. Take justice, for example. In chapter 5, verse 8, the Quran commands us, "I'dilu," be just, adhere to justice. "I'dilu huwa aqrabu lit-taqwa." Be just, for it is nearer to taqwa. In other words, taqwa facilitates and makes it easier to be just and fair. How? A person who has self-control can put on the brakes and will not trample over the rights of others. The same holds true for other virtues: goodness, thankfulness, compassion, honesty, generosity, humility. Taqwa is the bedrock of all of them. Without taqwa or self-control, we will not be able to respect moral boundaries. The second point that I would like to make. Every school of thought, every religion, every culture has a criterion for measuring human excellence. Either implicitly or explicitly, every school of thought, every culture, every religion has a yardstick to rank people. What is the yardstick or the criterion for a philosopher? Rational ability, the capacity to reason, aqlaniyat. How about aristocracies or ashrafiyat? What is the ranking criterion for them? Blood lineage. In aristocracies, what matters is not your knowledge, not your individual accomplishments. What matters is your pedigree. How about the modern day Western culture we all live in today? How does our materialistic culture rank people? Money. Money. On application forms, we are often asked, what is your net worth? And we put down a dollar figure next to our assessment of our net worth. In other words, we monetize our worth. That's the culture in which we are brought up. And this is one of the bedrocks, one of the pillars of the modern materialistic culture. To bring up human beings so they value themselves in terms of money. We monetize our worth. Now, what is the criterion of excellence in the Quran? How does God rank people? Luckily, we don't have to guess. Chapter 49, verse 13 answers the question. Ya ayyuhan nas, inna khalaqnakum min zakarin wa unsa wa ja'alnakum shu'uban wa qaba'ila lita'arafu inna akramakum indallahi atqakum inna allaha alimun khabir. O humankind, truly we created you from a male and a female and made you into diverse tribes and nations that you may come to know one another. Surely the most noble of you before God are the ones with most taqwa, righteousness. Truly, God is all-knowing, all-aware. Islam is truly revolutionary when it comes to value system. God, our creator, the all-knowing, the ultimate judge, has informed us what his divine ranking criterion is. It is not gender, it is not race, ethnicity, or blood lineage. God's ranking criterion is not the IQ, financial wealth, celebrity status. It is not even religious beliefs, practices, or denomination. No, God's yardstick for ranking is taqwa, righteousness. In other words, whoever has greater self-control will be more able to resist temptation, will be more able to stay within ethical boundaries, will be more able to respect the rights of others, and will have far less frictions and tensions with others. She will have a lot of peace in her heart. This is the sure path to salvation. Well, there can be said a lot more about taqwa in the Quran, and unfortunately, we are out of time, and I have to stop right here. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.